Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest introduced to you now. Ify Osiegbu, aka IfyUploaded, is a 44-year-old young health and fitness enthusiast. I had a really hard time introducing you. Your name is difficult for me because lots of I can see you laughing in the background. I love it. Ify's love of exercise drew him to document the calisthenics movement in the United Kingdom, which then led him to work with Steve Maxwell, Ido Portal, Christopher Sommer, and MMA fighter Michael Venom Page. Since then, he has been drawn to the topic of longevity. Under his YouTube channel called fizzYcaL, he has produced a small series called Mastering Youth, which documents the lives and motivations of several inspiring athletes over the age of 60. Having experienced a tremendous amount of loss and illness in his family, Ify is now on a mission to discover the truth or lies behind conventional health advice, and in particular, whether the guidelines on red meat consumption and saturated fat are flawed. Ify has started the MeatBasedHeals podcast, which is a resource that Ify is using to learn more about a meat-based approach to well-being. With a wealth of knowledge in developing realistic, practical, and sustainable methods to maintain fitness, Ify possesses a unique ability to assist individuals in achieving physical fitness and muscle growth. Ify, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you very much, Casey. Good to meet you. I'm actually going to second you, right? Let's see if you like this. Casey Ryan Ruff is a personal trainer and lifestyle and nutrition coach, specializing in the ketogenic and carnivorous ways of eating. His awakening to the benefits of low-carb approaches followed on from coaching thousands of people and supervising metabolic testing programs for a large corporate gym. In the almost 17 years he has coached, he's spotted common sticking points with his clients: weight loss, well-being, and performance issues. These sticking points prompted an exploration into the importance of dietary fat as a fuel source. Together with his wife, Bethany, they created Boundless Body LLC during the 2020 pandemic. Now a full-time advocate for the low-carb lifestyle, Casey is prolific in his podcast output, so prolific, in fact, that he's reinvigorated a fire in me to keep pushing the message despite obstacles, resistance, or lack of support. Welcome to your podcast, Casey.
I have never been introduced on my own podcast. That was amazing. That was amazing. That was
thank
totally
you,
unexpected.
man. Thank you.
Well done, my friend. So I've seen on your Instagram that you do hire out for voiceovers, and I was listening to some of the things you've done, like commercials. You did the phone line for like a hotel. Dude, if I stayed in a hotel that had a landline that you did the recording on, I would just sit in the room and keep dialing it to hear your voice. You've got the best voice, dude.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. I'm working on that side hustle as well. So that's something that's in the pipeline. So
we just cut out a little bit.
Oh yeah. Okay.
We're back. Well, I really appreciate you did such a good job on the introduction. Like I said, you've got such a great voice. This is going to be fun. So I think we just kind of met each other through Instagram. I'm not sure who friended who first, but I really love what you're doing with your page. Before we get into your personal story, can you tell us about like what you're trying to put out on Instagram?
It's basically I'm juggling so many different things. One, I'm into fitness. 2, I'm into nutrition. 3, I'm into well-being. 4, I'm into art and music and so much things, right? Fitness has been a part of me for forever. I've been, when I was younger, I used to sprint. I did some rugby training. I did some martial arts. I did some fencing. I did a whole heap of things. And it's always been kind of my grounding. I guess like a lot of people, sometimes you have a challenging childhood. So there are certain things that, sport and fitness kind of gave me as an outlet. And as I got older, it became less and less of, something that was in the kind of the forefront. I was kind of pushed into education, coming from a very traditional Nigerian family. So fitness was something that was kind of had to be pushed aside, which is one of my biggest regrets. And then I got into documenting fitness. So in a way, I kind of fooled myself that, I should document it and I would be some sort of media mogul rather than, actually partaking in fitness. And that was the brand fizzYcaL. So initially I started by putting up some of my own exercises. And people were like, "Oh, this is really good. How are you managing to do all of these body weight? Or how are you managing to stay fit without a gym membership?" And then I kind of introduced them to body weight training and calisthenics, and then I got a bit camera shy, so I decided to go behind the camera and document various people in the whole fitness scene, starting with the calisthenics movement, as you mentioned up front, and then most recently I've just become really obsessed with longevity. So I have the Mastering You series, which documents, people over the age of 60 who are effectively athletes, people that are in really good shape for their age. And I just kind of look at wanting to demystify fitness, because I think there's so many unnecessary complex messages that are put out there. And I think it can just be so much simpler. And with regard to eating and nutrition, so it's been in the last 3 years that I have become meat-based. So effectively, my diet is 70 to 90% kind of meat-based. And the reason why I got into it is I saw, this is the origin story for everyone. I saw a Joe Rogan podcast, right? And it was with the knees over toes guy.
Oh yeah.
And he was talking about how he was referring to Paul Saladino and the meat and the fruit diet. So I kind of went into a kind of a deep dive on that, looked into various other personalities, various other doctors and medical professionals in the space, various other influencers in the space as well, and it kind of coincided at the same time as my mum being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I looked into Alzheimer's and dementia, and all of the guidelines that she had followed and other various other family members had followed seemed to not put them in advantageous positions with their health. And the one thing that stood out is very few of them ate red meat. So then I kind of went into a rabbit hole looking into, the benefits of red meat, and kind of, 3 years on, I am pretty much meat-based with my eating. So that's kind of like my background in a nutshell, in a very big nutshell.
It's a big nut, a lot to pack there. You've gone through a lot, and it's a lot of convergence of different things. And so I'm sure we'll drift from nutrition to exercise to more of that longevity component and all of it. I do absolutely love, and part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on the show is I love that you said that there's too much noise in this space, in the exercise and nutrition space, and things can be simple. I love telling people things might not be easy. A workout should not be easy, but it should be simple. And you do such a good job of that. And I think it becomes even more valuable post-pandemic when, a lot of people lost their access to the gym and they didn't know what to do at home when they didn't have the machines. And, when I did my kettlebell training, I learned these specific moves that you do with kettlebells, and I kind of just stick to those. And I sometimes forget. And I remember when I see your page, all these fun, creative, cool things that you can do with something like a kettlebell. And you make it really fun and approachable. Even the video that you posted that I love, how to make a sled at home. And you're walking around your living room having loaded up a shopping bag that can slide on carpet really well. You made an awesome fitness apparatus at home in a minimal way. So people are looking for that, and that really helps them. So I think it's cool that you approach it that way.
Thank you. I mean, for me, I think one of in talking about making exercise complicated is one of the major things that people have issue with, or I find people end up yo-yo exercising, is because they go too hard. They push themselves to extremes that they don't need to, thinking that will give them longevity, that will give them health. And I think my philosophy has always been about play. So I've never, even though I've trained from a young age, I've never been into kind of killing myself in the gym, working to the point where your muscles ache and Like there was a brief period when I was into bodybuilding that I did that, but for the most part, for me, it's all about play, and that's how I think people can stick with an exercise regime, is if they make it playful.
Right.
If they're just going through the motions, you're not going to stick to it. You need to do something that you love. One of my things is dance. I love dance. For me, dance is the superior form of cardio. I'm not into jogging. I'm not into other than sprinting. I love sprinting, but for me, dance is just probably more so than weights. Dance is superior, So
I love that.
that's my take, my philosophy. So
I love that. Yeah.
how
No.
about
With
you?
yeah, same. When a lot of people approach us and want to start a program, they are extremely motivated, right? And they're usually overweight, and weight loss is a big goal for theirs. And I think people appreciate less the kind of style of training and all the physical benefits, the nutrition. Everybody wants to lose weight, but they don't really talk about in the beginning the mental clarity, or being able to fend off chronic diseases like you mentioned, Alzheimer's. Like, it's really just about the weight loss, and trying to help people understand that, like, yes, we're going to help you lose weight, and that's a big part of this, and yes, we're going to try to get you as quick results as we can, but you didn't get into this condition overnight, and you're not going to get out of it overnight either. And so it's really about helping that person manage their workloads, and make sure, yes, we're finding things that you love. Like my last clients that I just did a virtual appointment with, we were doing bicep curls in a certain way, and one of the guys I was training was like, I don't really like these bicep curls. It's like, well, let's find a different thing. Like, if none of this is for you to hate it. Like, exercise might be uncomfortable, but it's not for you to hate what we're doing. Let's find different ways and different tools and different things to use to be able to get you to that same goal. So I love your approach on that, and I agree with you fully. It needs to be fun. It needs to be organic and playful. And I'm not great at dance, but I think dance is one of the very best things that people can do to really express themselves and move in ways that humans are really good at moving.
It's interesting because a gentleman I was speaking to the other day, he's into baseball. He loves baseball, but he hates exercise. And in my mind, like, it didn't initially make sense, right? But then it's because he views exercise as kind of like prescriptive and regimented, whereas baseball is a game. So I was like, no, you need to inject the playfulness into exercise. You need to make it about, maybe not necessarily about reps and level of weight that you're lifting. It just needs to be fun. You need to kind of, find that childlike spirit, and just use that as your fuel when it comes to exercise.
I love that, man. And a good, fitness professional at any level can help try to mix that into a program. So I'm sure you were able to help him understand,
100%.
let's do things that are kind of fun that would be similar to baseball. And I'm really curious on your personal story. You mentioned a difficult childhood, and in the introduction we talked about, loss and a lot of tragedy. Can you touch on some of those points and some of the things you went through? You mentioned your mom, and I'm very sorry about your mom and other family members dealing with Alzheimer's, but what other kind of tragedies and things did you have to go through in your childhood?
Ooh. So I lost my dad when I was quite young. So it's kind of like, you don't have, other than, uncles that are there in kind of like on the outskirts, you don't really have like a male kind of role model. So that's been something that's actually probably still dealing with, in my mid 40s now. And then, various kind of with I was going to say with Nigerian culture, it's not exclusive to Nigerian culture, but we have like very, very close extended families. So, various aunties and uncles, cousins, would have fallen ill. What was it? Going back 2 years ago now, one of my cousins who was in her early 40s, she passed away from bile cancer. I'd never ever heard of bile cancer before.
I never have.
And most recently, my partner's mum passed away from pancreatic cancer. And I mean, cancer has been something that is quite common amongst various family members and various friends, and that's another thing that my mum's kind of Alzheimer's led me into kind of looking at meat-based eating. But since then, it's spun off into, looking at how beneficial it is for cancer, how beneficial it is for arthritis, osteoporosis, eczema, personality disorders. Like it's wild, some of the stuff that I've kind of come across and read. And it's very disheartening when you kind of walk out onto the street and you see people eating in a certain way and living in a certain way, and you're like, what's your eyes are open to stuff that, sometimes it feels a bit too overwhelming. It feels like a burden, So that's kind of my background with it.
Yeah, so the animal-based stuff came a little bit later, and you learned about that down the road a little bit, and you've always been into exercise. When did you start to look at anything nutritionally? Like, has that always been something you've tried to do? Like, did you always think that you were eating healthy, or did that come later in life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in comparison to, say, my peers, my close friends, back then I would have been the most healthiest. So, I would have eaten the kind of the prescribed healthy foods, lots of rice, which I hardly touch now. Lots of fish, chicken, lots of vegetables. So, and also it kind of came from like, I used to be quite a skinny kid. So the whole thing was, I wanted to bulk up. So I was kind of like on pretty much I'd say a typical classic bodybuilder's diet. So, sometimes straight out of the can tuna and, all of that stuff. But for the most part, it was heavy on the carbs, especially rice, especially pasta and bread. Bread. Yeah. That was a go-to every morning,
Yeah, and to most people, that would probably sound like a very healthy diet. You're eating vegetables, you're getting some protein in, you're getting fruits and vegetables. Like I said, I mean that most people might consider that to be a really healthy diet.
Yes, and funnily enough, connected to the whole rice thing, is since I was little, I've always had hay fever. During the summer months, I would want to scratch my eyes out, like it would be so bad, and after a year of eating meat-based, like I was able to, like something that I've never been able to do before, but I fell asleep in my partner's parents' garden, and there was like pollen floating all over the place, right? I'd never be able to do that before. Like I'd be rushing to go back in because I'd feel like I was suffocating. And my partner, who grew up in the countryside, so she was, exposed to pollen from, since she was a baby, she ended up getting hay fever at the same time that she started dating me.
Wow.
And I was eating rice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And basically, I think what happened was I introduced her to the high levels of rice that I was eating, and that she then got hay fever in her, adulthood, which is something that is quite rare. And it's just crazy, the things that the connections that I've started to make since going meat based. It's wild. It's wild.
It's unbelievable. What other physical conditions were you dealing with, and maybe you weren't even associating them with diet at all, but what other physical things were you dealing with before you found an animal based diet?
Physical things, kind of like you'd get these odd. I think because I've always been into fitness, always been into exercise. Like I haven't had any major issues, but I would have these kind of weird aches and pains in my feet or my knee that I couldn't prescribe to anything. Like I hadn't hit my foot, I hadn't hit my knee, but I'd have these weird and I haven't had them, or haven't had them as much, but like they would be quite a regular thing. Lower back issues as well. That would be something that is kind of, I don't think I'm doing anything different with my training, but in terms of lower back issues, I don't have the lower back issues that, I had in the past, where it would take me a while to kind of warm up. Warming up is something that I kind of don't do so much now. Like I can just go straight into exercise. So that's the physical side of things. Migraines was something that I used to get loads of. I can't remember the last time I had a migraine now. And what else? I used to get this funny. I used to get this tip of the tongue thing where I'd know what I wanted to say, but I just couldn't. I couldn't grab the words. I couldn't pull the words. And then now I'm starting to learn more about, diet and dementia and diet and, kind of cognitive issues. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I was in some sort of brain fog or something. And that's the reason why I wasn't able to kind of pull these words. I think that's mood is another thing, I've always been like a calm and chilled person. But there'd be times when I'd be wrestling inside with kind of anger and stuff. Not it wouldn't explode out kind of physically, but it would be there. And now I seem to feel a lot more at peace, even though I'm going through probably more stressful things now than I was before. But I just feel a little bit more kind of even keeled, So that's kind of like my take on eating more meat. So. How about you?
You've been doing this long enough. Yeah, I mean, it's all those things. I was just going to say, like, you've been doing this long enough that those would now be expected, right? Do you think you kind of understand what I might tell you in response to that question? Like, do you have an idea of the things I might say based on all the things that you've experienced and other people you've talked to?
100%. And also, I've listened enough to your podcast to know exactly what I expect. So
well, thank you. Yeah, so I was just like you. I had heard the podcast. It was a different podcast that I had heard. Mine was Joe Rogan, but it was Dr. Sean Baker back in 2017 or 18 when he appeared. I remember I had gotten into low carbohydrate and keto. I knew that fat was okay for you at that point, but I still couldn't fathom the idea that a diet without vegetables would be any kind of like healthy for you. And so I heard this podcast episode with Dr. Rogan. I turned it off at the point that Dr. Sean Baker said that he didn't put a lot of value into blood work. I thought blood work was hugely important and really valuable, and it was something that I was selling at my corporate job that I had at the time. And so I thought that was preposterous for a doctor to say he was only eating ribeyes and setting records and deadlifts and rows and you didn't need blood work at all. So I turned it off and kind of parked it, and it was listening to other people, like you said, like Dr. Paul Saladino, and reading his book that finally convinced me that maybe this would be something I could try. So I decided to try it for 30 days in April of 2019, and I lost a few more pounds, and that was cool. I got a little bit leaner, lost fat, that was cool. But it's like you're describing. The mental state is just so different on carnivore when you eliminate the last bit of the plants. Which is why I do encourage people, like, even if you don't stay strict on an exactly strict carnivore diet, maybe give it a try for 30 days to just kind of see how you feel. But I remember, something very stressful happened, and like you, I always thought of myself as a calm person and really optimistic, and I think that was true. But I remember something stressful happened, and it was just like it was okay. There wasn't it wasn't that like spinny, anxious. Yes. Kind of heavy response that I would normally have. I wouldn't yell or throw things around the room like you said, but it was just things were okay, and I noticed that continued, and it wasn't bliss, and it wasn't euphoria. It was just this like okayness, this everything is okay kind of a feeling, and that by and large hasn't left as long as I've stuck with this. If I reintroduce any kind of carbohydrates or sugar, I start spinning again, and my anxiety comes back, and my sleep sucks, and I start craving things that I wouldn't normally crave. Fast food starts to sound good to me, or donut sounds good to me. When I'm more strict carnivore, none of that even appeals to me. It doesn't even seem like food to me at all. But like you, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, for me, it's almost like it fills a gap. The eating of meat fills a hole that you don't need to then fill with the junk food and the carbohydrates, and it kind of it's satiating, literally. It kind of fills that need to want to eat anything that's not good for you. So Yeah.
Great point. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
great point. If you're nurturing yourself with all those foods and you're truly getting satiated, you really like snacking is just not really a thing. You're not that
Mhm.
interested in it. You can go do fun things and throw kettlebells around and have fun,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and then it's after. So here's the part that I would expect you to just have predicted. That I would say is like you look back and you go, oh yeah, like my shoulder that always used to ache or it would feel like it would like pop out of place when I played ice hockey. That has not happened in several years. Maybe it's the athlete's foot that I always used to get. I too have been in sports and done a lot of things and seemed to just chronically always have a little bit of athlete's foot, and now that's gone. Tolerance to the sun was a big one. Like I can go out in
Yes.
the sun and of the day and not burn and be fine. So it's just those little things like that. Did you ever get like athlete's foot too?
Yeah, when I was actually, you say that, but when I was when I was much younger, yeah, no, I haven't had a bout of athlete's foot in a while. But what I was going to say is those little aches and pains. It's so easy, particularly when you reach your forties, to be like, this is aging, this is normal, and you know, like if everybody else is going through the same thing, it is normal, right? And then when you get to your early 40s and you discover a way of eating that rejuvenates you, you're like, this is wild. This is, we have been either, not wanting to sound conspiratorial, but we've been sold a lie, right? That, when you hit your 40s, it's kind of all downhill from there. And I feel like 10, 15 years younger, like, physically, mentally. One of my side hustles is it's a physical job. It's a manual labor job, right? And usually I wouldn't have the brain space to say read something or listen to a podcast, or because I'd be so exhausted, so physically exhausted, so mentally I wouldn't have the bandwidth. And now I've got the bandwidth. I'm constantly listening to stuff, constantly reading stuff, maybe a little bit too much, but it's just opened up something that is just I can't evangelize about it enough. I try and tell people
I know the
about it
feeling.
so much. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I know the feeling. In your words, again, as you've been learning about this, and right, we don't want to be like, you know, say that this is a conspiracy or whatever. But what have you learned in your words? What has happened? Why do we go out in public, like you said, and like look around and see all these people that are in such poor health, and we think it's normal? Like, what were some of the major events that you can identify in your studies that got us to this point?
Oh man, it's I'd like to say, rather than a conspiracy, it's kind of more a conspiracy of circumstance. Or another way I look at it is I have this theory that it's kind of like the organism. It's an organism survival theory, in that all of these institutions, all of these corporations are like organisms. They want to survive, so they may not necessarily be doing stuff out of 100% vindictive reasoning, but they want to protect their bottom line. They want to survive. They want to continue, making profit. So it's not necessarily that they are trying to poison us or make us ill on purpose. It's just one of those things. It's just the way they operate, unfortunately. So you've got all of this, junk foods that are subsidized. One of the examples I give is that why is a bottle of Coke cheaper than a bottle of water? For me, it doesn't compute. Water that comes from the earth requires very little processing. Whereas Coke has multiple ingredients in it. Like, why is Coke cheaper than bottled water? Why is processed food that requires a whole production line cheaper than like a whole food? All of this just doesn't sit right with me. And then the issue then becomes that because these things are cheaper, a lot of people make the assumption that therefore they are good. And it's not that sorry, let me rephrase that. Because they're cheaper, it allows people to survive. right? You know, it allows people to budget and spend a lot less money on food, and it's kind of like a good thing in a way. It's kind of like we're told that, you know, or some people say that, you know, some of these companies are saving people because they're allowing them to use less of their income on food. When in fact, I feel that people should be spending more money on food. I say that, you know, I'm not in a privileged position or anything, but it just seems to me that if health is key to everything, food and exercise are so crucial. Those things are what we should be spending a lot more money on. As individuals and as society, that's how, you know, that's how we help things like mental health issues and obesity issues. And sometimes it feels like these companies are taking from us in the one hand, and one thing I've looked into is some of these corporations have investments in pharmaceutical companies as well as junk food companies. So they make money on the front end and they make money on the back end. The companies like Eli Lilly that produce diabetes drugs. I think it was one of their biggest, most profitable drugs. Some of their board members also sit on, I think it's called ADM, which is it's kind of a big American junk food corporation. Some of the board members sit on the boards of ADM as well, and it's like, this is worrying. You know, this is a conflict of interest that shouldn't exist. You know, but unfortunately it does, and sometimes I get quite disheartened by it. Sometimes I get quite depressed by it. Especially if I'm trying to convince friends and family. That is a big thing that can get me down sometimes.
Have you been able to talk to friends and family? Have you been able to have some
Yeah,
influence?
so two of my best friends, I'd say they've made they've made a big change with their eating, and also they're just more aware of it. So for me, it's not a case of trying to convince people. It's more a case of informing them. So if they make a decision that is bad, they're aware that it's bad. It's not that they're making a decision because they've been told it's good. It's more, I think doctors refer to it as an informed consent. So if you make a bad decision, you know you're making that decision for bad reasons. You're not making it because you've been told that decision is a good thing. So that's more kind of like my angle. But I guess oftentimes I come across as preachy and evangelical to my friends and family. How do you handle that? You must have family that are kind of resistant to that. So
It is, and it's so hard. It's like you said, like when you find, I think when you find this way of eating, it's not that you're trying to sell people on this way of eating or feel better that other people are like on your side with it. I don't feel that way, and I can tell you don't really feel that way. I don't care if it were a vegan diet or whatever. It's just a diet. But when you feel how good you can feel, when you can think how good you can think, like you feel better in your 40s than you did in your 30s, you naturally, I think, want to share it. And it's so hard for me to learn the lesson of like, if this person's not asking about it, if they're not going to be open to it. And so you're just going to more like alienate people if you continue to try. One example, one of my neighbors, posted something about the latest Netflix documentary about the twin study they just did. And the twin study took the sets of twins. There were 22 sets of twins, so 44 people, and divided them. And it was a really poorly done study that really didn't do that much. But they made this beautiful looking documentary about it and put it on Netflix, and it's getting all this attention. And one of my friends, one of my neighbors, posted about it and said, "This is an amazing documentary. It's really great." And I sit and I think, and I'm like, should I say something? Should I not? And I just try to like stick something in there, like, yeah, this is a really good documentary. Just remember that this was what they were actually measuring and whatever. And you just, I don't know. You hope that somebody out there will be willing to look at that and consider it before they start down a path that might take them to malnutrition and poor health. But you also don't want to alienate your friends who believe a certain way. So it's a challenge. As much as every time I go to the grocery store and I have my grocery cart and I want to point out that, yeah, no plants were killed in the shopping of all these groceries or whatever. It's tough because I know that person's probably not going to understand. They're probably not going to be interested in it. And so it's nice to find platforms like this or platforms like yours where you're sharing, but people don't have to listen to it if they don't want to. If they don't like it, they don't have to follow you. But if people do like it and it helps them, then awesome, you're helping people. So I think that's the best way to approach it, but it's a challenge. It's hard.
Yeah, big time, big time. And I think one of my biggest issues is similar to the way that I do fitness. Is I'm quite playful, quite experimental, and I find that the way people eat, the food guidelines that they're given, it makes them avoid like experimenting, or it switches off their intuition. So if you find a way of eating that makes you feel, as you said, better in your 40s than you were in your 30s, and someone else is, someone else is kind of saying that, if you eat this way, you may potentially feel better. Why not try it? If your health is not, I understand people whose health is compromised. I understand that there's a big level of fear that they probably have, they're probably going through. But if you're somebody that has health, I think you should be duty bound to experiment and try something different and see how it makes you feel. See how, it could potentially help your mental health, how it can improve your longevity, your energy levels. We're all part of we're all part of a group, all part of our tribes, whether it's a family tribe or a societal tribe. And the better we are as people, the better it is for, the rest of society. So, if you are in a position to experiment with how you eat and try something contrary to what you've been told, just do it. Like 30 days, 60 days, just give it a go. And if you feel good for it, then you've proved something to yourself. As much as it's important to follow science and understand science and not throw science kind of, away completely, it's also important, I think, to self-experiment. And if you don't self-experiment, then you never really know. That's how I view things. You never really know.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. It was a recent health conference that I went to, and the presenter was talking about different studies and asked everybody, like, what's the highest quality study that you can do? And everybody kind of murmured, like, oh, it's a randomized controlled trial. That's the best way that you can study and parse something out. And he corrected everybody. He said, no, the best study is an N of one. It's your own personal study of yourself. It doesn't mean anything scientifically. And what I eat doesn't scientifically mean that you have to eat the certain way, but the most important thing is how do you feel? How is your health? And you're right, that to have that attitude of exploration and willingness to try different things to improve health, I think is so important. Did you have quite a bit of resistance to a carnivorous way of eating, a more animal-based way of eating when you came across it? Or was it that one podcast had you pretty much convinced?
It was less. I think with the knees over toes guy, what he was like, his whole thing is about injury prevention, right? And I think, being in your early 40s, you're switched on to the fact that, you're getting older, there are these kind of aches and pains that you're feeling. Or anyway, back then, there were all these aches and pains that you're feeling. How can you overcome them in a way? And I always have a bias towards natural things. I did all the supplements and stuff in my 20s and maybe in my early 30s as well. And then I stopped doing them because I was like, something's not right here. Like, I think, I'm healthy, so I shouldn't have to rely heavily on these supplements and stuff. So even back then, I had that kind of in my mind. So I was ready to hear this idea that eating certain foods can make you kind of have less injuries, have less aches and pains. I was kind of open to that message. So it didn't take much to kind of try it, and just kind of see how things went. And yeah, 3 years on, I'm still pretty much meat based. So yeah,
That's amazing. Wow. And then just knowing you and your personality, I can tell you being so thorough and wanting to learn more, that then pushed you into like, okay, let's understand the mechanisms of why this works and why this is really important. And that's continued to lead you down that path of learning more, it sounds like. Is that
yeah,
correct?
100%. I mean, there's still some things that I'm kind of like the plants, the whole plants are trying to kill you thing. It's a compelling argument. Like, I get it. But then there's a bit of me that's like, so one of the issues that I tend to hear quite a lot, carnivores, maybe beginner carnivores coming across, is the whole electrolyte issue. And when it comes to fruit and veg and seeds and nuts, there are some electrolytes in them, right? So for somebody who doesn't want to touch, or who's biased against anything that is processed, that includes, some of these electrolyte brands, if someone is going through an electrolyte issue, having some fruit or having some, seeds and nuts, is that not something that you should try? And I'm not talking about doing it in excess. But then I'm also aware that some people have food sensitivities. And a lot of people came to carnivore due to food sensitivities. And some of these people are quite prolific in the carnivore low carb community, which is a good thing, but it may skew people's perception of kind of going meat based. Because if somebody's saying that, they get psychosis from putting some herbs and spices on their food, for somebody who doesn't have that level of food sensitivity, that just sounds as it is, it sounds extreme. It sounds almost alien. And unfortunately, some people who don't sit down to kind of consider the fact that it is a food sensitivity, I find those people kind of like run from the diet. They're like, this is a crazy thing. This is this is madness. I don't know. How do you stand on the eating of fruits, nuts, veg?
That was such a thoughtful answer. I really appreciate that answer. I'm kind of like you. I understand that there are certain people that are at that level. I personally know people that are at that level of carnivore that they can't have anything. They're beef, salt, water, or they suffer some kind of physical or mental ailments that makes it worth it for them to stay on a very strict, a very restrictive, most people probably rightly so would say a very boring diet. You know what I mean? We just got back from a trip. We spent 2 days in Vegas, and I ate carnivore while I was in Vegas. But, if I'm getting burger patties, I can't control the cooking of the burger patties the way I normally would. I can't control, if I had it with cheese, I can't really control what kind of cheese it is and how that makes me feel. Like I had, fried eggs on top of my burger patties. I can't control whether that was cooked in seed oils or not. And I noticed as I was coming home that I felt more hungry. I didn't feel as optimal. I wasn't bad. I had some sushi, had sushi rice, and that was fine. And it's just a lesser degree of how I normally feel, but it wasn't terrible and wasn't devastating. And I guess I'm kind of like you. I can mix in some foods from time to time. Last night I had an avocado. Sometimes I have, condiments, low sugar condiments. I know which ones are safe for me. But you're right. The thing that I worry the most about all of this is being able to share with somebody the benefits of trying a low carbohydrate or meat-based diet, or try to get more animal protein in the diet without driving those people away. Like you said, like if somebody thinks that we're telling everybody all you can have forever is beef, salt, and water, and that's it. Somebody who could have benefited from having a little bit more animal product in their diet is now going to be like, okay, well, that's stupid. I'm never going to do that. So you're right. It's something we should all be very mindful about, that we understand that some people need to be very strict, but not everybody needs to be strict. And most people could benefit from getting more animal protein in their diet, whatever level they are. So I'm with you. I think you had a really thoughtful answer to that question. And I think it's something that all of us in this community can be more mindful of.
You've reminded me, I was part of a group on Facebook called the Carnivore Bodybuilding Group. And I posted a couple of things on there, or had posted a couple of things on there. There's a lot of people struggling with doing carnivore and being bodybuilders, or doing heavy weight training sessions. So I would kind of comment occasionally and say, like, play devil's advocate and say, I've heard this thing about, various. So one person, for example, was talking about water, not being able to retain water. They were kind of, they were just going to the toilet all the time. And I know there's a transition period where some people have that. There's also the electrolyte issue. So people were talking to this person and saying you should try all of these different brands. And then there was an article that I saw about electrolytes and fruit. And I was like, maybe try a little bit of fruit. Just a little bit, not loads, just a little bit, maybe. So some people weren't too happy with that, and they kind of, but where it went wrong was I posted a breakfast, and I would say that this breakfast was 95% meat, right? 95% meat. But there was sweet potato. There's 5% sweet potato, maybe even less, right? 5% sweet potato. So the comments just came in like, sweet potato is not carnivore. Sweet potato is not carnivore. And I was like, yeah, like I understand. And I kind of decided to defend the post, because I was like, this is a breakfast I'm having with my 4-year-old daughter. This is a breakfast that, probably a lot of toddlers in the world don't get. They're probably snacking or eating, some cornflakes or some cereal or whatever. Whereas I'm introducing my daughter to mincemeat and a little bit of sweet potato. So I decided to defend this post with some humor. There was one guy saying that I should have posted it in the keto group and it shouldn't belong in the carnivore bodybuilding group. So I defended it, and then I got onto the point of electrolytes. I was like, but electrolytes aren't carnivore. Some of these brands that you're talking about, they're not carnivore. And then there was a whole interesting string, with the whole bodybuilding scene. There's the thing with, TRT and hormone replacement. I understand that some people need these things, right? But I said, strictly speaking, if you're going to have an issue with a meal that has less than 5% sweet potato in it, yet there's a lot of you that are talking about electrolytes and TRT and hormone replacement therapy, does that not, in a way, take away from the group? Does that not take away from the essence of what you're trying to promote? And then the next day, I went onto the group and I couldn't find it. I was basically blocked, and I was like, oh no. And I thought the post was in keeping with the essence of why people, become, carnivore. But I could see from a lot of the comments that there were people that were struggling with it who may not necessarily have had to struggle with it if they had introduced a food that wasn't meat-based, but was a small percentage of their overall meal. But anyway, it feels like a very similar energy that some vegan and plant-based people have. And as much as I think that meat-based is good, I worry sometimes when something is not health-led and it is identity-led. That would be my only beef with the carnivore and low carb community is that, you know,
Pun
pun
intended.
intended, is the identity thing. It should be health led, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you know, that's me getting off.
You should have been. It sounds like you should have been more. You should have been more grateful to learn that a sweet potato didn't come from an animal. Clearly, you didn't know that before. Then they pointed it out to you that it's not carnivore. Oh, thank you.
You
So
know,
I had no idea. I
yeah.
thought this was part of a chicken or something.
Yes. And then I got.
It's ridiculous.
Then,
I had the same thing happen.
I was going to say, then I got a bit.
Go
Then I
ahead.
got really silly, and I was saying, well, you know, if you're going to be like that, then water isn't carnivore, is it? I was, being really silly, but yeah, you know.
It's tough, and yeah, I posted a picture a few months ago, and it was like on my general Facebook page, so it wasn't even like on a carnivore forum or whatever, and it was a bunch of meat, and then it was like part of an avocado was on the side, and it was just a little green thing, and it wasn't vegans coming at me saying like you're eating so much meat. It was the carnivores that were saying, "What's that green thing on your plate?" It's like, guys, you're missing the
I mean,
point.
I can
Missing
also
the point.
understand if somebody comes from it from food sensitivity issues. I can understand why that avocado or that sweet potato could be offensive, but you know, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, it's just interesting the way people are with food and diet, and the way they talk about it.
Yeah.
It's very religious, you know, or can be very religious.
Yes,
Yeah,
very much. Yeah. It's understandable, but
yeah,
it's something to be aware
100%.
of. Something all of us could do a little bit better with. Yeah. I love what you do with fitness. We talked about it a little bit. You love kettlebells, for example. How are you able to make exercise more simple for people, like you mentioned earlier in the
So
conversation?
my biggest thing is in making exercise simple is turning exercise into. I like to. Well, there's the phrase. I think it's a lady called Katie Bauman who coined it, which is movement snacks. So it's, you know, every now and again, you know, you do a bit of exercise. You don't necessarily have to do it in an hour window. You kind of spread it out throughout the day. Another person who's kind of a proponent of it is a guy called Pavel Sotsulin. He's a big kettlebell guy, and I think he calls it grease the groove, where, you know, every so often, intermittently, you take a break and you do, you know, some form of exercise. And I think that's how people can make it fun. I think, you know, some people need that concentrated hour to train, whereas other people, it needs to be dotted throughout the day, just so that it's not overwhelming. Yeah, that's how I make it fun. That's how I make it playful. You know, occasionally I have the hour long sessions, but sometimes I'll just, you know, get up from my desk and do 1 minute or 2 minutes of an exercise and come back and do my work again, and then half an hour or an hour later go back and do some more. And I also find it's quite beneficial in the sense of getting older, because you're giving yourself rest periods, you know, and rest and recovery is crucial to maintaining, you know, strength and muscle as you go over that 40 hump, I guess. For me, I'm speaking
Yeah.
for myself, not for everybody, but yeah, speaking for myself. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm assuming those hour-long sessions are much less frequent than they used to
Yes,
be for you.
yes,
Is that
yeah.
true?
I'd say predominantly my training, when I the days that I do train, it's spread out throughout the day, and I kind of look at, you know, people that live in cultures where they're farming, or they're kind of manual based cultures. You know, they exercise throughout the day, rather than, you know, in a concentrated 1 hour session. And I also think it's good for weight loss, if you're constantly moving. I'm not a big proponent or fan of HIIT training. You know, as much as there's lots of science behind it, it just doesn't sit right with me that you do 15 to 20 minutes of high intensity training 3 times a week, and that's what you kind of rely on, or should be your bare minimum. I think the prescription should be that you move as much as you can, Yeah, that's my philosophy. That's my thinking. So
I love that. I love it. Yeah, I do the same with my workouts. Like for me, going to a gym for 45 minutes or an hour, it's probably just not going to happen anymore. But if I'm on a walk and I see monkey bars or something trying to do some pull-ups or doing push-ups, or there's so many different fun, engaging things that people can do. And I think it makes it more approachable when you tell people you don't need to do 20 minutes of high intensity, interval training. You don't need to go to the gym for an hour. Like do something with some intention, and do something every 30 minutes or an hour, like you said, like a snack. And I think that's a wonderful way of looking at things. Man, this has been a super fun discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed. We kind of talked before about having a style where we're kind of going back and forth and talking to each other. And I've loved it,
awesome.
Man.
It's been awesome. I've got a whole load of other questions. We may have to do this again because I've got so many things, other things.
Let's do this again. Let's do this again. I would absolutely love that. Your message is amazing. I love the energy that you're putting out there. I know you've got so many things going on, like you said. Hard to separate them all since you're so busy. But I love finding people who are doing really good work, and you're doing really good work. You make things fun and enjoyable, and I think people really appreciate that. And it's very approachable. You're a very kind guy. And like I said, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Can you hear me, Casey? You've frozen. Oh, yeah, there you are. You're back.
There we go. Perfect. I just took it up to the spot where I asked you where you would like people to go to find you and connect with you.
Instagram, I guess, is the main place, and it's IfyUploaded. That's IFY and then uploaded. And like all of my different projects and different hats are on there. The MeatBasedHeals, that's the podcast that you've reinvigorated me to continue, pushing forward with. That's something that I'm doing. There's something called Shake Up the Routine, which is a project that I'm doing with my partner, which is to help people that are that work from home to kind of demystify and make exercise a lot easier for them. Juggling many things.
Such a stud. I love that.
I think the same of you. I need to get some info on the whole podcast thing, and because you are prolific, you upload on a regular basis. Is podcasting one of your main things? Is it bringing in some pennies? Like, what's the deal?
No, I spend money on podcasting. This is something that I have to fund myself, and we don't monetize. And I mean, we've gained a few clients from it, but it's not the purpose. It's just like you, man. It's just a passion that trying to get out there and hopefully inspire some people. And it's been just a fun journey. And I get to chat with people like you. I get to meet people all over the world and learn their stories. And it's so fun to have these conversations, and this has been no different. So, Ify, thank you so very much for taking the time, being on our show, and having this great conversation back and forth. It's been a pleasure. Let's do this again.
Oh, I think you've cut out again, right at the end.
we had a few times it cut out. That's all good.
Okay.
Well, thanks again for being on, man. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.